In the shadowed cradle of ancient mountains, where the wind still whispers secrets of forgotten empires, a single flame flickered to life, not in a hearth, but in the heart of betrayal. It was the year 1218, and along the endless ribbon of the Silk Road, caravans heavy with spices, silks, and dreams of distant horizons creaked under the weight of a world on the brink. Merchants from the sun-baked bazaars of Baghdad haggled with fur-clad traders from the steppes, their voices a symphony of tongues, Persian laced with Mandarin, Arabic tangled with Mongol growls, while Buddhist monks in saffron robes chanted prayers beside Zoroastrian fire altars, and Nestorian Christians etched crosses into the dust beside Confucian scrolls. This was the greatest artery of civilization, a vein pulsing with the lifeblood of trade that bound east to west, idea to idea, God to God. But on that fateful autumn day, as the sun dipped low over the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush, a Mongol arrow pierced the throat of a careless ambassador, and the world ignited. What followed was no mere skirmish, no fleeting clash of swords. It was the unraveling of an era, a cataclysmic war that scorched the earth from the gates of Vienna to the walls of Beijing, erasing libraries that held the sum of human knowledge, toppling dynasties like dominoes in a gale, and birthing an empire forged in the ashes of the old. This is the story of the day the Silk Road burned, not with a single blaze, but with the relentless fire of conquest that devoured a civilization whole. Imagine the acrid smoke choking the air of Samarkand, once the jewel of the world, its turquoise domes cracking under catapult stones, while scholars clutched scrolls to their chests, whispering final incantations over texts that would never see the light again. Feel the tremor of hooves thundering across the Gobi's endless sands, a horde of shadows blotting out the stars, their bows drawn not just against flesh, but against the very fabric of memory. From the opulent courts of the Khwarezmian Shah, where gold flowed like the Amudarya River, to the humble tea houses of Kashgar, where poets dreamed of immortality, the war's tendrils snaked inward, claiming lives by the million and legacies by the legion. It was Genghis Khan's reckoning, a storm of vengeance that began with a spilled cup of kumis and ended with the bones of cities bleaching under an unforgiving sky. But this is no dry chronicle of dates and battles. It's the human pulse beneath the history. The widow in Bukhara who bartered her last jewel for a child's safety, only to watch the flames claim them both. The Sufi mystic in Nishapur who prophesied the end in riddles of fire and horse, his words lost to the wind as his minaret crumbled. The Venetian explorer's ancestor, scribbling frantic notes in a Genoese ledger, piecing together tales of horror that would one day lure Marco Polo eastward into the void. As we journey through this apocalypse of the medieval world, we'll trace the threads of that burning road, the diplomatic sleight that lit the fuse, the sieges that starved souls as surely as steel, the cultural inferno that melted the gold of Persian poetry into slag, and the eerie rebirth from the cinders, where Mongol Khans sat upon thrones built from the rubble of caliphs. Prepare to walk those haunted passes, to taste the dust of fallen idols, for in the story of how the Silk Road burned lies the fragile truth of our own connected world, how one thread pulled can unravel us all. The Silk Road was never a single path, but a labyrinth of arteries snaking through empires like roots seeking water in parched soil, born not of intention, but of necessity, when the Han Dynasty's silkworms spun threads fine enough to tempt the nomads of the Tarim Basin into uneasy alliances with oasis princes. From Xi'an's drum towers, where emperors dreamed of eternal rule, caravans laden with porcelain that gleamed like captured moonlight would trudge westward, past the terracotta sentinels frozen in eternal vigilance, crossing the Taklamakan's whispering dunes where mirages mocked the weary with visions of palm-fringed oases that weren't there. Camels, those stoic ships of the desert, bore bolts of silk dyed in the blood red of cochineal insects from distant plateaus, exchanged in the shadow of the Pamirs for horses whose speed could outrun the wind, bred by tribes who worshipped the sky gods with libations of mare's milk, fermented into a froth that burned the throat like liquid fire. Further west, in the fertile crescent of Transoxiana, the air thickened with the scent of pomegranates splitting under the sun, and the sharp tang of saffron harvested by hand from crocus blooms that flowered only once a year, a luxury that Roman senators once pawned their togas to afford. shipped across the Caspian on barges crewed by slaves who sang dirges to drowned companions. Here, in cities like Merv, the crossroads of conquerors, Zoroastrian priests tended eternal flames in temples carved from living rock, their chants mingling with the calls of muezzins from newly built mosques, while Jewish merchants from the diaspora tallied ledgers in Hebrew script, bartering lapis lazuli from Badakhshan mines that yielded stones blue as the tears of fallen angels. Knowledge flowed freer than gold. Greek treatises on geometry smuggled from Alexandria's ruins found their way into Baghdad's House of Wisdom, translated by scholars who labored by lamplight through nights that blurred into dawns, their ink mixed with the sweat of exiles fleeing Byzantine inquisitions. Buddhist stupas dotted the passes like wayward stars, their gilded domes sheltering relics carried from the Bodhi tree's shade in India, where monks debated the illusion of self over bowls of rice pilaf spiced with cumin from the Indus valleys. And overhead, the heavens themselves were mapped, Arab astronomers with astrolabes of brass charting constellations that guided Sogdian traders, those silver-tongued middlemen whose language became the lingua franca of the route, a melodic patois that could charm a Khan or curse a thief with equal eloquence. Yet beneath this tapestry of exchange lurked fragility, a brittle peace held by the weight of mutual greed. For every caravan that arrived intact brought tales of bandits who melted into the hills like smoke, or tolls exacted by petty warlords who crowned themselves kings of dust-choked forts. The Khwarezmian Empire, sprawling from the Aral Sea to the Persian Gulf, stood as the road's jealous guardian, its Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, a figure of shadowed grandeur who traced his blood to the Seljuks, those Turkic horse lords who had once humbled the Crusaders at Dorilaeum. In his court at Gurganj, walls inlaid with malachite and mother-of-pearl echoed with the lute strings of Persian minstrels reciting Ferdowsi's epics, verses that lionized Rustam the hero slaying demons in the name of forgotten kings. But power in Khwarezm was a double-edged scimitar. Muhammad's viziers whispered of omens in the flight of crows and his armies, clad in lamellar armor forged from the iron of Bokhara's smithies, drilled in formations that mimicked the phalanxes of Alexander, whom they claimed as an ancestor through veils of myth. It was into this web of ambition that Genghis Khan, born Temujin in the blood-soaked cradle of the Mongolian steppe, cast his gaze, a man whose life had been a forge of loss, orphaned young when his father, poisoned by Tatar rivals at a feast of mare's flesh, left him to scrape survival from the Onon's frozen banks, where wolves howled challenges to the stars and clans feuded over herds that meant the difference between feast and famine. Temujin's rise was no fairy tale of divine right, but a brutal alchemy of cunning and cruelty, allying with blood brothers like Jamukha only to betray them when ambition demanded, wedding his sons to the daughters of conquered tribes, and binding his warriors with oaths sworn over the entrails of enemies, their loyalty sealed in the shared horror of survival. By 1206, at the Kurultai on the banks of the Kurulan River, where eagles circled like omens of dominion, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, his banner of 9 horsetails fluttering in the wind that carried the scent of impending storm. His Mongols were not an army in the Western sense, no serried ranks of spearmen marching to fife and drum, but a living tempest, light cavalry on ponies no taller than a man's shoulder yet swift as thought. Each warrior his own archer, smith, and scout, their composite bows of horn and sinew loosing arrows feathered with eagle plumes that could pierce mail at 200 paces. They lived off the land like locusts, their yurts folding into packs at a shout, women and children woven into the horde's fabric, tending herds that sustained the endless march. Genghis's vision was not mere plunder but subjugation, a world remade under the blue vault of Tengri, the eternal sky, where tribute flowed to Karakoram like rivers to the sea, and dissent was crushed with the efficiency of a scythe through wheat. The Silk Road, that glittering prize, called to him not as a trade route but as a vein to bleed dry. Its cities fat with the hordes of centuries, its peoples ripe for the yoke. The spark that would ignite it all came innocently enough, or so the chronicles whisper. A caravan of Mongol envoys, perhaps 100 strong, dispatched in 1218 under the command of a trusted lieutenant named Barchuk, bearing gifts of white gerfalcons from the Altai's crags and bolts of sable fur softer than a lover's sigh, their mission to open parley with the Khwarezmian Shah. They crossed the Jaxartes under skies heavy with the promise of rain, their horses' hooves churning the mud of riverbanks lined with willow thickets where nightingales trilled indifferent to mortal schemes. At the frontier fortress of Otrar, a mud brick bastion squatting like a toad on the Sirdarya's edge, governed by a satrap named Inalchuk whose greed outstripped his wisdom, the envoys were met not with the courtesies of silk and sherbet, but with chains and suspicion, whispers of spies, of barbarian hordes massing beyond the horizon, fueled by merchants jealous of Mongol trade that bypassed their tolls, led Inalchuk to seize the gifts and melt the gold into ingots stamped with his own mark, a petty larceny that would echo through eternity. The envoys, stripped and humiliated, were paraded through Otrar's bazaars, where fruit sellers hawked melons veined with crimson and coppersmiths hammered bowls from Turkmen ore, their pleas drowned in the clamor until, in a courtyard ringed by date palms, Inalchuk's guards poured molten silver down their throats, a death as grotesque as it was symbolic. Silver, the currency of the road, turned to poison in the gullets of peace-bearers. Word raced back to Genghis like a steppe fire fanned by gale, carried by survivors who had slipped the noose, their tale embroidered with the agony of comrades foaming at the mouth, eyes bulging like storm clouds. In his camp amid the pine-clad slopes of the Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain where his father's ghost lingered, Genghis convened his Noyans. Those grizzled generals whose scars mapped campaigns from the Jin walls to the Tangut strongholds, their faces lit by the flicker of butter lamps as they debated the insult's weight. Vengeance, they agreed, would be no whisper but a roar. The Shah's realm, that arrogant sprawl of minarets and manicured gardens, would pay in rivers of blood for a single caravan's desecration. Thus, in the spring of 1219, as cherry blossoms dusted the steppes with pink confetti and the first shoots pierced the thawing earth, the horde mobilized, a force of perhaps 200,000 souls, warriors and kin alike, their wagons groaning under siege engines crafted by captured Chinese engineers, trebuchets of bamboo and oxhide that could hurl stones the size of oxen over battlements. They forded the Irtish on rafts lashed from pine trunks, the river's current tugging at the hems of their deal robes like reluctant fingers, and pressed into the Fergana Valley, where apricot orchards bowed under the weight of fruit that burst with juice at the slightest touch. A brief idle before the steel, scouts rode ahead, their silk scarves tied bandit style over faces to ward off dust devils, mapping passes where avalanches could be loosed with a well-placed boulder, and fording streams fed by glaciers that calved thunderous chunks into milky torrents. The first blood was spilled at Otrar itself, that fateful gate, besieged in the heat of summer when the sun baked the walls to the hardness of pottery, and flies swarmed the awful pits outside. Genghis, ever the strategist, encircled it with a noose of horse archers who harried supply lines, their arrows whistling like vengeful spirits to pick off sentries perched on ramparts crenellated like shark teeth. Inside Inalchuk's garrison, a motley of Turkic levies and Persian conscripts, manned ballistae that spat Greek fire in arcs of napalm fury. But the Mongols countered with mantlets of wicker and wet hides, advancing sappers who tunneled beneath the foundations, their picks ringing like funeral bells in the cool earth. For 5 months the city held, its populace reduced to boiling boot leather for sustenance, mothers weaving their hair into ropes for escape only to find the walls ringed by impaling stakes, a forest of warnings under the merciless sky. When the breach came, it was with a roar, the walls slumping in a cascade of dust and screams as Mongol stormers poured through, their yataguns cleaving helms like overripe gourds, the air thick with the copper reek of slaughter. Inalchuk fled to a tower that pierced the heavens like a defiant spear, but Genghis's engineers toppled it with counterweights groaning like damned souls, and when the governor emerged, coughing mortar from his lungs, his eyes met the Khan's unblinking gaze. The punishment was poetic in its horror, molten silver, ladled from cauldrons still warm from the mint, poured into his eyes and ears and mouth, a mirror to the crime that had birthed the storm. His body then flayed and stuffed with the gold he had coveted, displayed on the gates as a scarecrow for governors yet to come. Otrar's fall was the overture, a thunderclap that reverberated through Khwarezm's veins, sending couriers on lathered horses galloping to Gorganj with tales of demons on horseback who drank the blood of the fallen and left no seed in the wombs of their women. Shah Muhammad, ensconced in his palace of rose marble veined with onyx, where fountains tinkled melodies scripted by long-dead hydraulics and concubines from Circassia danced veils that shimmered like heat haze, dismissed the reports as the exaggerations of craven tongues. Arrogance that silken noose blinded him. He had crushed the Karakatai only years before, their Buddhist lamas scattering like leaves before his scimitars, and his realm brimmed with mercenaries from the Rus steppes, Georgian cataphracts whose lances could skewer a man from crupper to crest. Yet doubt gnawed at the edges, prompting him to divide his forces, 50,000 to shadow the horde at the iron gates, another host to bar the passes of the Paropamisade, while he himself retreated westward, a golden peacock fleeing the hawk, his treasury wagons creaking under ingots that could ransom empires. His mother, Turkan Khatun, a woman of iron will who ruled the harem like a shadow sultan, urged consolidation, her voice a rasp honed by decades of intrigue. But the Shah's pride was a fortress no council could breach. As autumn leaves turned the valleys to tapestries of flame, the Mongols shattered his illusions at the Battle of the Indus, though that was yet to come. First came the sack of Bukhara, the dome of whose Friday mosque, vast as a god's upturned palm, had witnessed the recitations of Avicenna's canon, that polymath's verses on the pulse's rhythm and the stars' secret harmonies. The city fell in February of 1220, after a feint that drew defenders into open fields where Mongol feigned retreats lured them onto boggy ground, then encircled them with the noose-tight precision of a garrote, arrows falling like black rain until the earth drank deep of knightly valor turned to mud. Within the walls panic reigned. Imams led processions through alleys fragrant with jasmine trellises, beseeching Allah for walls of iron, while artisans in the suku hammered shut their stalls, burying looms woven with threads from cashmere under flagstones slick with fear sweat. When the gates splintered under Ram's Head battering, the horde surged in on a tide of fury, but Genghis, reining his destrier amid the melee, called a halt, not mercy but calculation. For Bukhara's scholars were the road's memory keepers, their madrasas repositories of algebra born from Al-Khwarizmi's quill and optics that bent light like divine will. He strode into the great mosque, his boots echoing on carpets from Tabriz knotted with prayers, and addressed the cowering throng from the minbar carved with arabesques of vine and verse. "I am the scourge of God," he proclaimed through interpreters whose tongues tripped over the weight, "sent to punish your sins, for your Shah has hoarded the fruits of the earth while your souls starve." The people, hollow-cheeked phantoms in tatters that had once been brocade, prostrated themselves, some embracing the conqueror's shadow as deliverance from their own tyrant's taxman. But illusion shattered swiftly. The city was methodically stripped, its granaries emptied into Mongol bellies, its forges conscripted to shoe the endless hooves, and its men marched away in chains to swell the horde's labor pool, building bridges over the Zeravshan that would carry more death downstream. Women and children fared little better, parceled as chattel to loyal Noyans, their cries a dirge that haunted the nights around campfires where bards strummed dombras to tales of the Khan's youth, when he had gnawed frozen hides to stave off starvation. From Bukhara's pyre, the fire leaped to Samarkand, that verdant queen of the road, her Registan square paved with tiles that captured the rainbow in glazed shards, where astronomers once calibrated the heavens to the heartbeat of prayer. The siege lasted but days, treachery within hastening the end, a gate left ajar by a bribe-blinded guard, through which poured the vanguard like wolves to the fold. Streets ran with gore, the air rent by the wail of reed pipes as pipers heralded the reapers. But amid the carnage, Genghis sought the ulama, those bearded guardians of hadith, commanding them to transcribe Mongol decrees onto vellum salvaged from burning scriptoria, a forced symbiosis where Islamic law bent to the yasa, the Khan's unwritten code of justice swift as an arrow's flight. As winter gripped the land in fists of frost, coating the Zeravshan's banks with rime that cracked under boot, the horde pressed on to Urganj, Gurganj's swollen twin, a labyrinth of canals fed by the Amudarya where houseboats drifted like water lilies, their decks alive with the chatter of fishwives hawking sturgeon bellies fat with caviar. Here the resistance burned fiercest, the Shah's son Jalal ad-Din rallying levies who fought from reed-thatched rooftops, their javelins glinting in torchlight as they rained down on attackers wading waist-deep in brackish floodwaters, diverted to drown the invaders. For 6 months the struggle endured, a charnel dance where Mongols dammed the river upstream, starving the city into delirium, its defenders gnawing on the leather hinges of doors while hallucinations of feasting Khans mocked their thirst. When the walls finally yielded, splintering like dry bone under the assault of Chinese counterweight trebuchets that hurled naphtha pots blooming into hellflowers of flame. The retribution was total. Every soul, man, woman, child, put to the sword or flame, their bodies heaped into pyres that lit the night like false dawns. The canals choked with corpses until the waters ran red as diluted wine. Genghis, surveying the desolation from a rise where wild thyme perfumed the char, wept not for the dead but for the waste, his shamans murmuring that Tengri demanded such offerings to appease the earth's angered spirits. Yet even in this abyss, threads of the road endured. Captured weavers from the royal looms, their fingers calloused from shuttling gold thread through linen fine as spider silk, were spared to clothe the horde's elite, their patterns now emblazoned with the tamga of the Ordu, the eternal camp. The Shah himself, that fleeting phantom of empire, fled across the Caspian like a leaf on the tide, his fleet of 1,000 vessels scattering before Mongol pursuers who swam after them with daggers between teeth. Boarding in sprays of salt water and screams, he sought refuge in the Abbasid court at Baghdad. But the caliph, wary of the contagion of defeat, denied him sanctuary, leaving Muhammad to perish on an island off Mazandaran, his body wrapped in a carpet woven by his own looms, a king reduced to contraband. His son, Jalal ad-Din, proved of sterner clay, a lion cub with the mane of his father's folly shorn away, rallying the remnants at the Battle of Parwan in 1221, where in the shadow of the Hindu Kush's snow-capped fangs, Khwarezmian cavalry charged with lances couched, shattering Mongol flanks in a thunder of mail and dust that rose like genie smoke. For a moment, victory's honey touched his lips, his banners of green silk snapping triumphant over fields strewn with enemy dead. But Genghis, undaunted, regrouped on the windswept plateau, his archers loosing volleys that darkened the sun, turning the tide to slaughter as Jalal's host dissolved into routed phantoms fleeing toward the Indus. There, on its roiling banks fringed with banyan groves where peacocks screamed challenges to the dawn, the final clash unfolded, a ford contested in monsoon fury, waters churning brown with silt and blood, Jalal's elephant-mounted warriors trumpeting war cries in Persian laced with Turkic oaths, their howdah's archers raining shafts tipped with tiger poison. Genghis, from a ridge where thunderheads gathered like vengeful jinn, directed the encirclement, his sons Jochi and Chagatai vying for glory in the melee, their swords singing through the spray until Jalal, wounded but unbowed, spurred his steed into the river's maw, swimming to the far shore where he would haunt the fringes of empire for years, a thorn in the Khan's side that festered into legend. With Khwarezm's heart excised, the war's blaze spread unchecked, licking at the borders of India, where Delhi's sultans trembled behind walls of red sandstone, and northward to the Kipchak steppes, where Rus princes forged unholy pacts only to shatter under the yoke at the Kalka River in 1223, their golden domes toppling into the dawn's icy embrace. But the true erasure came not in the fields of battle, but in the quiet aftermath. When the road's pulse faltered, caravans rerouted through Fear's detours, oases abandoned to Sand's reclamation, libraries like that of Nishapur, where Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat once flowed from quills dipped in wine-dark ink, reduced to tinder for soldiers' cook fires, their verses curling to ash with the scent of camel dung. Persian miniaturists, masters of scenes where lovers picnicked amid tulip fields under gazelles' watchful eyes, found their pigments scattered, their brushes used to kindle blazes that consumed their patrons' palaces. In China, the Jin dynasty's porcelain kilns cooled to cracks, their blue and white dragons unfired, while the Song Court's silk mills ground to halt, looms silent as ghosts. The Silk Road, that cradle of convergence, became a scar tissue of memory, its bazaars echoing with the ghosts of hagglers, its passes patrolled by toll-keepers in felt hats bearing the Khan's tamga, extracting tribute in horses and virgins from survivors who learned to bow low. Yet from this holocaust rose the Pax Mongolica, a fragile peace enforced by the post horses galloping relays across 5,000 miles, carrying missives sealed with jade that bound the remnants, Venetian factors slipping into Tabriz to trade amber for spices, Franciscan friars like William of Rubruck debating Nestorian priests in the shadow of Altai yurts, their arguments on transubstantiation mingling with shamanic chants to horse spirits. Genghis's death in 1227, on the eve of subduing the Tanguts in a blizzard-swept hellscape where peach blossoms mocked the frozen dead, marked the war's uneasy coda, his body borne secret to Burkhan Khaldun. The funeral cortege slaying all witnesses to preserve the secret, a tomb lost to time like the road's unburied glories. His sons carved the empire into Ulysses, Ogedei pushing to the gates of Vienna in 1241, where Hungarian knights in plate clashed with steppe lancers in a symphony of steel that echoed the road's final gasp. Batu Khan's golden horde exacting silver from Moscow's wooden Kremlins, and Kublai, the philosopher-conqueror, enthroning himself in Xanadu's marbled halls, where peacock pavilions house the polo kin, those Venetian eyes wide at the wonders that survived the burn. The war that erased a civilization did not end history, but redirected it. The Silk Road's embers kindling new paths, gunpowder recipes smuggled to Europe via Crimean ports, mathematical treatises rebound in Oxford scriptoria, the very idea of global connection forged in the Khan's iron will. Today, as we trace those faded tracks with drones humming over the Taklamakan's Vale, or sift ruins in Uzbekistan where potsherds bear the ghosts of Sogdian graffiti, we see not just loss but legacy, the fragility of links that bind us, the cost of hubris in a world of endless horizons. The day the Silk Road burned was the day we learned to fear the flame within our own ambitions, a lesson etched in the silence of empty bazaars, where the wind still carries the faint chime of camel bells, a requiem for what was, and a warning for what might yet be. As the embers of Urgench cooled into a crust of charred bone and twisted iron, the Mongol horde paused only long enough to lick its wounds and redistribute the spoils. Crates of turquoise-glazed pottery shattered in the frenzy now mended by captive artisans, their hands trembling as they etched new motifs of wolves devouring lambs onto vessels that would grace the Khan's tables far across the steppe. Genghis, his face a map of wind-scored lines beneath a helmet crested with yak tail, gazed southward from the ruins, where the Amu Darya's diverted waters had carved new channels through what was once fertile floodplain, now a bog of bloated corpses feeding flocks of vultures that wheeled in lazy spirals against a sky bruised purple by smoke. The war's appetite was insatiable, a beast that fed on momentum, and with Khwarezm's core gutted, the flames leaped outward like sparks from a forge, seeking fresh tinder in the fringes of the known world. Scouts returned from the Pamirs with tales of high passes where snow leopards shadowed their tracks and yeti-like guardians of hidden valleys hurled boulders from crags. But these were mere whispers compared to the roar of opportunity, the riches of the Abbasid Caliphate to the west, gleaming Baghdad with its circular walls planned by geomancers to mirror the cosmos, and to the east, the splintered kingdoms of the Jinn and Song, their silk looms still humming in ignorance of the storm brewing beyond the Gobi's dunes. Yet it was the human element that bound the conquest, the stories carried on the lips of survivors who trudged in the horde's wake. A young Khwarezmian archer spared for his skill with the composite bow, his eyes hollow as he recounted nights in Samarkand where his sister had danced at weddings to the strum of rhubarb strings, now silenced forever. Or the Chinese engineer, conscripted from the walls of Zhongdu, who marveled at the Mongols' adaptation of his gunpowder recipes into bombs that burst with thunderous fury, filling the air with shards of pottery packed with nails and despair. These voices wove the tapestry of terror, spreading faster than hooves, turning neutral cities into fortresses of defiance or submission. In the wake of Otrar's molten justice, word of Inalchuk's fate reached even the distant courts of Delhi, where Sultan Iltutmish, a former slave turned sovereign, fortified his gates with elephant chains and prayed to idols draped in marigolds, sensing the shadow lengthening over the Indus. But Genghis's gaze fixed first on the pursuit of Jalal ad-Din, that elusive prince whose defiance was a burr under the saddle, rallying scattered remnants in the mountains of Ghazni where opium poppies bloomed blood-red amid terraced fields of wheat guarded by Pashtun tribesmen with coal-lined eyes and daggers curved like crescent moons. The chase became legend, a cat and mouse across landscapes that shifted from arid badlands pocked with camel thorn to alpine meadows where edelweiss clung to cliffs like stars fallen to earth. Jalal's band, a ragged host of perhaps 10,000, melted into the Hindu Kush's labyrinth, using goat paths known only to locals who bartered safe passage for Mongol horses left lame by stone bruises. Ambush followed ambush at a narrow defile near Bamiyan, where colossal Buddhas carved into rose cliffs stood sentinel with serene smiles oblivious to the carnage below. Jalal's slingers hurled stones that cracked Mongol helms like eggshells, while his horsemen charged downhill in an avalanche of yells and flashing yatagans, scattering a detachment into ravines where echoes multiplied their screams into an army of ghosts. Genghis, enraged by the sting, ordered the valley razed, not just the villages of mud and timber, but the very statues, those 6th century giants hewn by devotees of a faith long supplanted by Islam's tide. Powder charges, packed into fissures by sappers who sang dirges to forgotten ancestors, shattered the serene faces into rubble that tumbled like divine tears, an act of cultural obliteration that erased not just stone, but the memory of a crossroads where Greco-Buddhist art had fused Hellenistic curls with lotus thrones. Gandharan bodhisattvas whose togas flowed into dhotis now dust under Mongol boots. This desecration was no whim but policy, a message etched in explosives. No idol, no idea, no empire stood eternal against the Khan's will. As winter clamped down in 1221, blanketing the passes with snow that muffled the crunch of pursuit, Jalal slipped southward, his trail marked by frozen corpses of those who fell to exposure, their fingers clenched around prayer beads or Qurans waterlogged and illegible. He crossed into the Punjab, where the 5 rivers converged in a braid of silt-heavy waters, seeking alliance with the Rajput kings whose forts perched on Aravalli crags like eagles' nests, their walls studded with iron spikes to impale siege ladders. But treachery lurked even here. Local chieftains, eyeing Mongol gold, sent pigeons with messages tied to legs feathered in iridescent green, betraying encampments for promises of governorships under the new order. The climax came at the Indus Ford, a stretch of river where monsoon swells had subsided into treacherous currents swirling around sandbars treacherous as false friends. Genghis, having force-marched his Tumans through blizzards that claimed toes to frostbite, arrayed his forces on the western bank, archers knocking arrows while shamans rattled drums skinned from enemy hides to invoke Tengri's favor. Jalal, outnumbered and cornered, formed his line with elephants caparisoned in chainmail that clinked like temple bells, their trunks painted with vermilion war marks, howdahs bristling with crossbowmen who cranked bolts with mechanical precision. The battle erupted at dawn, mist rising from the water like the breath of submerged dragons, Mongol horse archers circling in the Tulukma maneuver, feigning flight to draw charges into killing grounds where hidden reserves waited with lances lowered. Arrows darkened the sky, thudding into elephant hides that trumpeted in agony, drivers slashing with ankus hooks to urge the beasts forward through volleys that felled riders in sprays of blood warm as summer rain. Jalal, astride a black charger frothing at the bit, led the countercharge, his sword a blur that unhorsed a Noyan whose braid whipped like a banner in defeat. But the weight of numbers told. Chagatai's division flanking from reed beds, Joshi's pressing the center until the Khwarezmian line buckled like a bowstring snapped. In the melee's heart, steel sang against steel. The river's roar drowned by the cacophony of war cries in a dozen tongues, Mongol gutturals mingling with Persian invocations to Ali, Turkic oaths to the sky god clashing with Hindu chants from mercenary Gurkhas whose kukris hacked limbs with surgical glee. As the sun climbed, baking the field in heat that turned blood to sticky tar, Jalal saw the end, his banners trampled, his elephants maddened into stampedes that crushed their own, and in a moment of defiant grace, he spurred his horse to the river's edge, leaping into the flood while arrows hissed around him like angry hornets. He swam the torrent, mail shirt dragging like chains of fate, emerging on the far bank where Delhi's scouts watched in awe. A prince reborn as myth, his escape a spark that would ignite resistance for years, harassing Mongol supply lines with guerrilla strikes from Sindh's deserts where mirages danced like jinn. Genghis, watching from afar with a spyglass of polished crystal looted from Samarkand, laughed, a rare sound like cracking ice, and declared the prince a worthy foe, sparing his family in captivity as a gesture to fate's caprice. With the Indus secured, the horde splintered, tendrils probing deeper. Subutai and Jabi, those indomitable generals whose names struck terror like thunder, led a raiding cavalcade northward around the Caspian, an epic detour of 17,000 miles that skirted the Aral's shrinking shores and plunged into the Caucasus, where Armenian vintners in valley vineyards pressed grapes into wines aged in clay amphorae buried under church floors. They shattered Georgian knights at Tbilisi, Their heavy cavalry foundering in mountain streams turned to traps by felled logs, lances splintering against Mongol shields of wicker and rawhide. Onward to the Crimea, sacking Sudak's Genoese trading post where merchants from Venice bartered slaves for spices, their ledgers inked in Latin now fuel for campfires, before swinging north to bully the Volga Bulgars, those fur-trading Khans whose longships plied rivers thick with sturgeon. The pinnacle was the Battle of the Khalkha in 1223, where Rus princes, Fractius's alley cats, united too late against the invaders on the steppes' edge, their druzhina and scale mail charging with kite shields emblazoned with saints, only to be enveloped in the classic Mongol pincer, arrows reaping like sickle through rye until the field was a carpet of gilded helms and broken icons. Subutai's mercy was mockingly creative. Captured princes suffocated under a banquet platform where Mongol officers feasted on roasted swan, their laughter vibrating through the wood onto the dying men's chests. This raid was no mere plunder but reconnaissance, mapping the soft underbelly of Europe for campaigns yet unborn. While back in Central Asia, Tolui, Genghis's youngest son, a mirror of his father's ferocity with the poet's cruel eye, turned the war's fury on Khorasan, that cradle of Persian Renaissance where Neshabur's libraries bulged with manuscripts illuminated in gold leaf, pages depicting Alexander's conquests in miniatures where horses flew on wings of imagination. The city's defiance, refusing surrender after a minor slight, unleashed apocalypse. Siege towers rolling on wheels greased with mutton fat, catapults hurling carcasses swollen with plague to breed terror within, and when the walls fell after 4 days, a slaughter ordained by Genghis's own hand from afar, every living thing put to the blade, pyramids of skulls erected as monuments that bleached white under the sun. 1,000,000 souls claimed in hyperbole that felt truth in the telling. Tolui's wife, Sorkhagtani, a Nestorian Christian of fierce intellect, watched from the sidelines, her counsel shaping the empire's tolerance for faiths that bowed but did not break, her sons destined to rule from Karakoram's silver tree fountain, dispensing kumis and wine. Merv followed, the ancient city of Margiana where irrigation canals fed by the Murghab turned desert to paradise. Its dams breached to flood fields into quagmires that sucked down defenders. The sack lasting weeks as Mongols hunted survivors in underground Kharez tunnels, emerging coated in mud like troglodytes to claim virgins hidden in grain silos. Herat resisted longest, its citadel a nest of falcons, but famine cracked it open, the population decimated not by sword alone, but by the slow death of hope. Children bartered for bread crusts until the gates creaked wide for the inevitable. These horrors were systematic, designed to cow the road's remnants. Oasis towns like Balkh, birthplace of Zoroaster, its fire temples quenched forever, altars smashed by hammers that rang like Judgment Day. Yet the cost lingered in the demographics. Central Asia's population halved, irrigation neglected until Timur's brief revival. Cities like Balkh ghosts until Soviet archaeologists unearthed their layers. The war erased the Khwarezmian flicker, but from its ashes rose the Yuan, Ilkhanate, Chagatai Khanate, and Golden Horde, a quadrumvirate stitching Eurasia into a single breath. In modern echoes, as Belt and Road trains rumble over tracks paralleling ancient routes, or archaeologists in Uzbekistan unearth glass beads fused by ancient heat, we touch the Burns legacy, a reminder that civilizations are but caravans in the desert, vulnerable to the spark of hubris or the gale of ambition. The day the Silk Road burned was not an end, but a forge, hammering humanity into shapes unforeseen, where the smoke of yesterday curls into tomorrow's horizons. The flames, though banked under Ogeday's steadier hand, still smoldered in the collective memory, fueling nightmares in Baghdad's coffee houses where storytellers spun yarns of horsemen from hell for coppers tossed into brass bowls. The great Khan, portly from court excesses yet sharp as a Damascus blade, presided over Karakoram's grandeur, a city of felt palaces and tiled mosques, where Confucian scholars debated Taoist alchemists under the watchful eyes of Mongol overseers, their arguments translated by Uyghur scribes whose nested script captured nuances lost in air. He dispatched armies with the casual flick of a decree sealed in vermilion ink, Subutai again leading the charge into Europe, but it was the push south that reignited the road's inferno, targeting the Abbasids who had snubbed Genghis's envoys with the same arrogance that doomed Khwarizm. Hulagu, Ogeday's nephew, a man of scholarly bent who consulted astrologers before battles and collected philosophers like trophies, marched in 1256 with a host swollen to 500,000, including Armenian auxiliaries and Frankish engineers lured by promises of eastern gold. His path carved through Persia, where the assassins' eagle nest fortresses in the Elburz Mountains fell one by one. Alamut's library of esoteric tomes on hashish-induced visions burned or carted away. The Grandmaster's paradise gardens of houris and fountains trampled under siege engines that pounded walls with stones hewn from the peaks themselves. The Ismaili sect, those dagger-wielding shadows who terrorized sultans from hidden valleys, submitted at last, their immaculate devotion no match for Mongol persistence. The last imam executed with a silk cord as befitted nobility, his body rolled in a carpet down the cliffs. With the assassins extinguished, Hulagu's gaze fixed on Baghdad, the city of peace, its round walls encompassing 1,000,000 souls in a warren of souks, where spices from Zanzibar mingled with ambergris from whale bellies washed ashore on Arabian coasts. Caliph al-Mustasim, decadent descendant of Harun al-Rashid, hoarded gold in subterranean vaults while his viziers plotted intrigues over sherbets flavored with rosewater, dismissing the Mongol ultimatum as bluff. The siege began in 1258. The Tigris dammed to isolate the city, pontoon bridges of boats lashed with chains allowing the horde to encircle like a necklace of death. Catapults hurled not just stones but incendiary pots that bloomed into firestorms, igniting wooden suburbs where refugees huddled in reed huts. Inside, panic bred betrayal, Shiite quarters opening gates in hope of favor, only to share the Sunni fate. When the walls breached after 12 days, the sack lasted 40, a delirium of destruction where the House of Wisdom's remnants, already diminished but still vital, were tossed into the river, inks running in multicolored swirls that dyed the Tigris black for days. Pages of Ptolemy's Almagest and Ibn Sina's Qanun floating like dead fish. Scholars were herded into squares, forced to reveal hidden texts or face the sword, many choosing silence and martyrdom, their blood mingling with the mud of streets once paved with bricks stamped with Quranic verses. The Caliph, paraded in rags, watched his treasury opened, only to be wrapped in a carpet and trampled by horses, a death without bloodshed, honoring the taboo on royal blood while crushing the man beneath hooves shod in silver. Estimates whisper of 200,000 dead, though hyperbole swells the number to 800, the truth lost in the reek of unburied flesh that bred plagues claiming even Mongol lives. Hulagu, withdrawing to Azerbaijan lest the miasma claim him, left a deputy to mop up, but the damage was eternal. Baghdad, navel of the Islamic world, reduced to a provincial backwater. Its canals silted, its academies echoes. The ripple shattered the Golden Age's last glow. Mathematics stalled without Baghdad's patronage. Astronomy diverted to Maraga's observatory under Nasir al-Din Tusi, rescued from assassins and repurposed to chart planets with instruments of unprecedented size, brass sextants that gleamed under Persian skies. Yet Hulagu's Ilkhanat embraced the conquered, converting to Islam under Ghazan, building rabats for travelers and endowing madrasas where Mongol princes studied fiqh alongside falconry. Further east, Kublai's ascent in 1260 after Munka's death in a Sichuan siege, struck by a stray arrow amid fishing weir battles on the Diaoyu fortress, marked the empire's Sinicization. The Khan moving court to Dadu, modern Beijing's seed, where canal barges bore rice from the Yangtze to feed a bureaucracy of 1,000,000 officials examined on Confucian classics, annotated with Mongol glosses. His war on the Song was a naval epic, fleets of junks with trebuchets clashing on Poyang Lake, fire arrows igniting sails and blazes that lit the water like molten gold, culminating at Yamen, where the Song fleet, cornered in a bay, fought to the last, courtiers leaping overboard with the boy emperor rather than submit. Kublai's yuan reigned over a China unified but transformed, paper currency enforced by death for counterfeiters, census takers counting souls from Tibet to the Sea of Japan. The Silk Road thrived under his seal, Marco Polo's father and uncle arriving in 1271, bearing oil from the eternal flame at Baku as papal gifts, young Marco entering service as envoy, his eyes cataloging wonders, asbestos salamanders that lived in fire, rhinoceros horns carved into belts curing poison, coal burned in braziers warming winters harsher than Venice's lagoons, His accounts, dictated in a Genoese prison, ignited Europe's imagination, maps redrawn with Cathay's riches, spurring Columbus westward in search of Zipangu's gold roofs. But beneath the glamour, the burned scars festered, famines from overtaxed lands, rebellions like the Red Turbans channeling White Lotus mysticism into uprisings that toppled the Yuan in 1368. Zhuyanzhang's Ming rising from the ashes with porcelain fleets under Zheng He sailing to Africa, but that's another flame. In the Chagatai realm, centered on the old Silk heartlands, Khans warred among themselves, Al-Malik's Christian churches ringing bells beside mosques until Timur, that limping scourge claiming Genghis's blood, erupted from Samarkand in the 14th century, rebuilding on Mongol foundations but aping their terror, pyramids of skulls at Delhi, where he sacked the Sultanate in 1398, elephants stampeding in panic from firecrackers tied to tails, Timur's empire brief, his library stocking spoils from Isfahan's tileworks and Damascus's steel, a cultural resuscitation where Persian epics were illustrated in Herat miniatures of unparalleled delicacy, lovers entwined amid gardens echoing the road's lost paradises. The Golden Horde, meanwhile, extracted Danegeld from Rus principalities, Moscow rising under Ivan as tax collector turned Tsar, the Orthodox Church preserving icons through Tatar yokes. The war's erasure was selective, destroying Khwarezmian identity, scattering Turks westward into Anatolia, where Ottomans forged a gunpowder empire, but preserving conduits for plague. The Black Death hitching rides on flea-infested rats in Crimean sieges of 1346, galloping the road to decimate Europe, 1/3 gone in buboes and blood. This unintended export balanced the ledger of loss, weakening foes for Renaissance rebirth. Today, in the Registan's restored glory, or Xi'an's Muslim quarter where Hui descendants grill lamb skewers under neon minarets, the burn's heat lingers, a testament to resilience. How fire clears for new growth, civilizations phoenix-like from cinders. The Silk Road's burning day forged our interconnected age, threads pulled tight across continents, warning that in the web of trade and idea, a single torch can illuminate or incinerate, as Hulagu's banners faded into the Azerbaijani mists, leaving Baghdad a smoldering husk where jackals picked at Califal finery tangled in date palms. The Mongol machine ground onward, its gears oiled by the blood of the erudite and the innocent alike. In the Ilkhanate's nascent courts at Tabriz, where caravanserais welcomed Armenian wine merchants and Chinese silk peddlers under the same arched gateways inlaid with lapis mosaics, Hulagu's wife Doks Khatun, a Karaite Christian of royal lineage, advocated for Nestorian communities, her influence sparing churches from the torch that consumed so many synagogues and temples. Scholars like the Jewish astronomer from Baghdad relocated to build observatories amid the orchards of Moraga, collaborated with Shiite polymaths rescued from the ruins, their zodiacal calculations etched on tablets that predicted comets with eerie accuracy, omens interpreted as divine approval for the Khan's Buddhist leanings or Islamic flirtations. The road's revival under Ilkhan rule was pragmatic. Tax farms auctioned to Orthodox Armenian financiers who lent at interest forbidden to Muslims, funding roads patrolled by Mongol Darugachi overseers whose seals of authority, carved tiger motifs in gold, opened gates from the Mediterranean to the Yellow Sea. Caravans swelled again, camels laden with rhubarb from Tibetan plateaus, curing Mongol constipation from meat-heavy diets, or frankincense from Omani trees burned in Ilkhan censers to mask the scent of intrigue in harems, where Georgian beauties plotted with Persian viziers. But peace was illusory. Ain Jalut in 1260, where Mamluk slaves turned sultans in Egypt's Nile Delta ambushed Kitbuka's detachment, Baybar's cavalry charging with lances that pierced the myth of invincibility, arrows felling the Christian Mongol general amid olive groves sacred to prophets. This Palestinian clash, dust-choked and desperate, halted the westward blaze, the Mamluks' victory a Pyrrhic shout preserved in Cairo's chronicles, their circlets of gold forged from melted Mongol spoils. Hulagu, raging from afar, plotted revenge but died in 1265. His successors like Abaka forging alliances with Crusader remnants. Joint letters to Europe proposing pincers against the Saracen. Dreams dashed by mutual suspicion and the road's treacherous winters. Ghazan's conversion in 1295 marked a turning point. His edicts in Uyghur and Persian proclaiming Islam the state faith. Mosques rising on ziggurat foundations. Friday sermons praising the Khan as shadow of God, while Sufi orders infiltrated the military, dervishes whirling in camps to rhythms that echoed shaman drums. This syncretism birthed wonders. Rashid al-Din, the Jewish convert vizier compiling the Jami al-Tawarik, a universal history illustrated with Chinese-style landscapes where Genghis rode beside Adam. Pages bound in sharkskin and illuminated with pigments ground from Afghan lazurite. Copies dispersed along the road, influencing Ottoman historians and even Ming annals. A bridge of ink spanning the burn. In the Yuan heartland, Kublai's opulence peaked at Xanadu. Coleridge's dream made stone. Pleasure domes of gilded bamboo where fountains sprayed mare's milk. Peacocks strutted lawns manicured by Korean eunuchs. And theater troupes performed shadow plays of Confucian morals twisted with Mongol heroics. His wars extended to Java's Spice Islands, fleets foundering on monsoon reefs, or Vietnam's jungles where elephants trumpeted through bamboo thickets, disease claiming more than Dai Viet spears. But innovation flourished. The postal system with 1-400 stations, bells clanging to announce riders changing mounts in minutes, messages flashing from Dadu to Tashkent faster than gossip in a bazaar. Agricultural reforms introducing champa rice for double harvests, feeding populations ballooned by peace. Astronomical bureaus where Muslim engineers built armillary spheres that spun like prayer wheels, predicting eclipses to awe Tibetan lamas into submission. Marco Polo, that Venetian fabulist or truth-teller, served as governor of Yangzhou perhaps, or merely envoy. His tales of coal black stones burning endlessly sparking Ruhr mines centuries later, or asbestos salamander wool, woven into incombustible cloths demonstrated at European courts to gasps. His departure in 1292, escorting a Mongol princess to her Persian groom via sea to avoid land bandits, carried seeds of gunpowder knowledge that birthed the bombard, changing warfare forever. The Chagatai Khanate, wilder sibling, guarded the central road with ferocity. Khans like Quebec introducing paper currency dubbed Chow, minting square coins with Arabic script, fostering Transoxiana's rebirth. Samarkand's grapes ripening into raisins traded for Bohemian glass. Bukhara's carpets knotted with patterns encoding tribal migrations. Dua's raids into India netted diamonds from Golconda's mines. Faceted later in Antwerp, while Alugu's tolerance allowed Franciscan missions. Odoric of Pordenone trudging the passes in 1320s friar robes. Baptizing in oasis fonts before Mongol overseers. Barbaro's temporary peace shattered in internecine wars. Tamerlane emerging from the chaos, his 1336 birth in Kesh a spark from embers. Timur's conquests mimicked Genghis but with Persian polish, sacking Isfahan for its tile makers, who rebuilt Samarkand's Bibi Kanyam Mosque with domes blue as lapis skies, crushing the Golden Horde at Kundusha, weakening them for Moscow's rise, invading Delhi to cart elephants and scholars. His limp from a sheep-rustling wound no bar to mounting thrones piled with skulls at Herat. His death in 1405, en route to China, left an empire fractured. But his grandson Ulugh Beg built Samarkand's observatory. Sextants carving star positions into marble with accuracy rivaling Greenwich. Murdered by his son in a parody of patricide. The Golden Horde's decline accelerated with Tokhtamish's folly, sacking Moscow in 1382 only to be crushed by Timur, splintering into Khanades like Kazan and Crimea, their slave raids filling Istanbul's markets until Russian cannons boomed. The road's final burn came with the age of gunpowder empires, Ottomans at Constantinople in 1453, using Hungarian-found cannons cast from Mongol-inspired designs. Safavids' Twelver Shi'ism enforced with Kizilbash red hats, Mughals descending from Timur and Genghis. Babur's memoirs in Chagatai detailing Kabul gardens where he wept for onions, founding an India of Taj Mahals built on Silk Road marble. The overland route waned with Vasco da Gama's Cape rounding in 1498, sea lanes siphoning spices to Lisbon, but the Burns legacy endured in genetics, Mongol Y chromosomes dotting from Budapest to Beijing. In cuisine, kebabs from steppe roasts meeting dumpling wrappers. In language, Turkic loans in Persian, Chinese and Mongolian. Archaeological digs unearthed the layers. In Otrar, molten silver traces in Governor's Palace. In Karakorum, Venetian glass beside Yuan Celadon. DNA from mass graves revealing diverse victims. Slavic, Iranian, Han. Modern Silk Road initiatives. High-speed rails from Urumqi to Tehran echo the yam, but with WeChat pings replacing Paisa clinks. The war that erased a civilization birthed our global village, a phoenix of connectivity where one flame's destruction seeds 1,000 lights, reminding us that history's greatest burns often illuminate the path forward, fragile threads weaving through time's endless caravan. The phoenix's wings, spread wide over the 14th century, cast shadows that danced with the ghosts of the burned road, where Timur's architects in Samarkand raised Guri Amir mausoleums with ribbed domes piercing skies like arrows loosed toward eternity. Their tilework a riot of turquoise and gold depicting paradises lost and regained. Ulugh Beg's stars, charted with precision that shamed Ptolemy, influenced Copernicus via Byzantine refugees, heliocentrism whispering through madrasa debates where mullahs argued fate versus free will over tea brewed from caravan samovars. But the empire's fracture post-Timur spawned warlords. Shah Rukh, ruling from Herat's gardens where nightingales sang in plains trees planted by Alexander's veterans. His wife Goharshad, endowing mosques with minarets that called the faithful to prayers, blending Sunni orthodoxy with Sufi ecstasy. The road pulsed with life again. Portuguese factors in Hormuz bartering cloves for horses, Russian fur traders in Astrakhan swapping sables for Bukharan cottons, the overland link a backup to sea routes plagued by pirates. Yet Ottoman expansion choked the western end. Mehmed II's cannons thundering at Belgrade, while Ivan III's Moscow threw off the yoke, marrying Byzantine Nice to claim Third Rome mantle, his terems rising with onion domes gilded from horde tribute. In India, Babur's 1526 Panipat victory, muskets mowing Rajput charges, founded Mughal splendor. Akbar's Fatehpur Sikri, a red sandstone dream of syncretic faith. Dini Ilahi blending Islam, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism in courts where Jesuit priests debated Brahmins over maps inked with Mongol projections. Jahangir's peacock throne, studded with Koh-i-Noor diamond looted from Delhi's vaults tracing to Timur's sacks, symbolized the road's enduring wealth, caravans from Agra to Lahore laden with indigo-dyeing European doublets blue. Shah Jahan's Taj, marble-veined like the Amudarya in flood, employed artisans descended from Persian captives, their chisels carving Pieta Dura flowers that bloomed eternal for Mumtaz Mahal. The Burns cultural fusion peaked here, Persian as court language, miniature paintings of Radha Krishna in Mughal garb, ragas scored for sitar-evoking steppe lutes. Eastward, the Ming walled off the Mongols. Great Wall rebuilt with bricks fired in kilns fueled by the coal polo marveled at. Their treasure fleets under Zhenghe reaching Mecca's ports. Giraffes presented as Keelan auspicious beasts. But isolationist edicts in 1433 closed the seas, ceding trade to Europeans. The Manchu Qing, descending from Yurshan foes of the Jin, conquered in 1644, their queues enforced on Han subjects. But adopting Yuan administrative savvy, the road reopening for tea caravans to Russia, bricks compressed into blocks traded for furs at Kyakhta's fairs. Tea, that leaf from Fujin Hills, addicted Europe, balancing trade deficits with opium later forced by British guns. But that's the road's modern scar. The scientific revolution owed debts. Algebra from Al-Khwarizmi preserved in Mongol-translated texts reaching Padua. Zero's concept via Indian monks in Baghdad's pre-burn houses. Medical dissection banned in Europe but practiced in Ilkhan hospitals, influencing Vesalius. Gunpowder, perfected in song but weaponized by Mongols, birthed the cannon at Cressy, 1346. English longbows falling to French bombards inspired by horde defectors. The plague, Yersinia pestis from Mongolian marmots, rode the yam to Kaffa, catapulted over walls in biological war, decimating Genoa before ravaging Avignon, weakening feudalism for Renaissance individualism. Art flourished in the aftermath, Giotto's frescoes echoing Byzantine icons carried by Nestorian traders, perspective from Persian miniatures informing Da Vinci. Literature too, Chaucer's pilgrims telling tales akin to polos, Boccaccio's Decameron fleeing plague like Baghdad refugees. The Enlightenment's coffee houses brewed beans from Yemen via Ottoman ports, debates fueled by caffeine mirroring Samarkand Sukhu hagglers. Industrial revolutions spun on cotton from Mughal fields. Machines in Manchester weaving threads once hand-loomed in Dhaka, displaced weavers starving in famines. Colonialism followed the road backward. British in India aping Mughal durbars, Russian in Central Asia playing great game against Qing, railways piercing passes where Genghis rode. The 20th century saw Bolsheviks unearthing Karakoram, Mao claiming Mongol heritage for minority policies, Silk Road tourism now ferrying backpackers on buses over routes drones map for belt and road bullet trains. Climate change reveals more. Receding glaciers exposing passes used by Subutai, mummies in Tarim with Celtic tattoos linking east-west pre-burn, DNA maps Mongol markers in Hazara Afghans, Kalmyks on Volga, tracing the horde's genetic legacy. In literature, Ecos Baudolino imagines Prester John via polo myths. Rushdie's Midnight Children weave Mughal-Mongol threads into magical realism. Film epics like Mongol depict Genghis humanized, not demon. The Burn teaches impermanence. Empires rise on trade's back, fall to hubris's spark. In our digital age, information superhighways echo the yam, data packets galloping where camels trod, but vulnerable to cyber fires. The day the Silk Road burned warns of connectivity's double edge, unity and exchange, catastrophe and conflict. As satellites beam GPS over the Taklamakan, or archaeologists sift Nishapur's ashes for lost verses, we honor the erased by remembering, a civilization not gone, but transformed, its ashes fertilizing the global garden we tend today, fragile against tomorrow's unseen torch, and so the narrative spirals onward. Through centuries where the smoke cleared to reveal not void but mosaic, shards of the burned road reassembled into patterns unforeseen by Genghis or his chroniclers. In the 15th century, as Renaissance humanists in Florence pored over Greek texts smuggled via Mongol-tolerant Constantinople before its fall, the road's ghosts influenced Petrarch's sonnets with Persian ghazal rhythms, love's torment echoing Khayyam's Rubaiyat fragments salvaged from Nishapur's pyres. Uccello's battle paintings captured perspective battles akin to Panipat's cannon smoke, while Bellini's Ottoman portraits drew from Ilkhan miniatures where Khans sat cross-legged on carpets knotted in Bukhara. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, Mehmed's bombards thundering like Hulagu's catapults, scattered scholars westward, their Byzantine chains of Plato's dialogues linking to Baghdad translations preserved in Moraga. Columbus, poring over Polo's annotated margins in Seville, sailed west seeking Kublai's gold, his caravels loaded with maps distorted by the road's legends, discovering Americas that rerouted trade forever. Spices flowed Atlantic, silver from Potosi, funding Ming porcelains shipped around Cape, crashing land routes until Suez Canal's cut in 1869 revived overland dreams. The Safavids, rising in Ardabil's shrines, enforced Shi'ism with sword and silk, their carpets, prayer rugs with tree of life motifs tracing to Timurid gardens, exported to Vatican altars. Shah Abbas welcoming Armenian vintners to Isfahan suburbs, wines aging in cellars beneath mosques with Iwans vaulted like steppe skies. Their wars with Ottomans over Caucasus silk monopolies echoed Khwarezm-Mongol clashes, battles at Chaldiran where cannon decided faith's fate. In Uzbekistan, the Shaybanids held Samarkand's remnants, their Khans patronizing poets composing in Chagatai, precursor to Turkish epics. The road's romantic allure drew explorers, Clavijo to Timur's court in 1404, describing fountains of quicksilver. Goes in 1603 seeking Cathay's Christians, dying in Suzhou with Nestorian stones in pocket. Jesuit missions followed, Ricci in Beijing adapting to Confucian rites. His world map in Chinese characters incorporating Yuan surveys. Clocks ticking in Forbidden City while Kangxi Emperor hunted in Mongol style. The Qing's zenith under Qianlong saw 10,000-mile tours, inspecting yam-like post roads, commissioning Jesuit painters to depict conquests in European oils blended with ink wash. Opium wars pried open ports, but overland tea routes persisted. Russian caravans braving Gobi blizzards for Kyakhta swaps. Bricks molded with flowers for connoisseurs in St. Petersburg samovars. Sven Hedin mapped Lopnor's Wandering Lake in 1890s, unearthing Tarim mummies with plaid weaves akin to Celtic, proving ancient Indo-European links predating silk. Stein raided Dunhuang Caves, scrolls of Diamond Sutra printed in 868 rolling to British Museum, Buddhist texts mingling with Manichaean hymns in Sogdian script. The 20th century's upheavals rerouted again, Trans-Siberian Railway linking Moscow to Vladivostok, paralleling horde paths, Silk Road rallies and vintage cars evoking camel treks, Soviet Central Asia collectivized oases, but preserved madrasas as museums. Archaeologists like Tolstov excavating Khwarezmian forts with aerial photography. China's Cultural Revolution smashed relics, but Reform era rebuilt. Urumqi markets selling kebabs to tourists flying in on jets. UNESCO sites now dot the route. Mogao grottos with murals of flying apsaras. Xi'an's Big Wild Goose Pagoda housing Tripitaka translations from Indian monks via the road. Lhsa's Potala, where Dalai Lamas received Mongol protectors. Modern genetics trace 0.5% of world population to Genghis. Star clusters and chromosomes mapping conquest's intimate violations. Climate data from tree rings in Altai pines reveal 1210's droughts pushing nomads westward. Hubris meeting desperation in Atrar's insult. AI models simulate sieges. Virtual reality letting users ride with Subutai across virtual steppes. Documentaries on History Channel, like this script's inspiration, recreate the burn with CGI flames licking digital Samarkand domes. Podcasts dissect Polo's exaggerations. Historians debating if he reached China or compiled tavern tales. In literature, Amitav Ghosh's Ibis trilogy weaves opium along sea silk extensions, while Eco's Foucault pendulum conspiracies nod to assassin legacies. The Burns lesson in 2025, as supply chains snag on pandemics or wars, Ukraine's grain blockades echoing horde raids, or chip shortages from Taiwan mirroring silk embargoes, we see fragility. China's BRI builds rails through Pakistan's Karakoram, dams on Mekong altering flows like Mongol diversions, debts binding nations in new yokes. Cryptocurrencies echo paper chow, decentralized like yam relays. Space Silk Roads loom, Starlink satellites beaming over deserts where camels once plodded. The day the Silk Road burned reminds us, civilizations interconnect, one spark can cascade, but from ashes rise networks stronger, woven with caution's thread. In ending this segment, we circle back to the hook, a flame from betrayal illuminating humanity's shared path. Eternal caravan under stars charted by Ulugh Beg, whispering that erasure is illusion, transformation the truth. To delve deeper into the personal tapestries woven from the war's loom, consider the unsung voices. The women who bridged the Burns chasms, like Sorghaghtani Beki, Tolui's widow, maneuvering her sons, Munka, Kublai, Hulagu, Arik Boka into power with a cunning that outshone male Noyans, her Nestorian faith tolerating shamans and imams in Karakoram's diverse court. She funded churches and monasteries, her letters in Uyghur script negotiating alliances that kept the empire's fragments cohesive. Or Dok's Khatun, Hulagu's consort, whose cross-adorned banners during Baghdad's sack, sparing Christians while mosques burned, her influence birthing the Franco-Mongol pacts that teased Europe with anti-Mamluk dreams. Princesses married off to seal pacts, like Kublai's daughter to Korean kings, bearing Yuan fashions to Goryeo courts where celadon pots glazed with inlaid sangam mimicked Chinese blue-white. Captive artisans' descendants blended cultures, Persian potters in Jingdezhen kilns perfecting underglaze blue, motifs of dragons coiling with Islamic arabesques. The road's matriarchs like Turkan Khatun of Khwarezm, whose arrogance rivaled her sons, ruling from behind veils in Gurganja's harem, her execution by drowning in the Amu a poetic justice for diverted rivers. Survivors' tales, oral epics sung by Kazakh Akhins on Dombra strings, recount grandmothers hiding seeds in hair braids to replant scorched fields, birthing generations who tilled the Zaravshan's banks anew. In folklore, Jalal ad-Din lives as a Robin Hood, haunting Indus bends with ghostly raids, his swim immortalized in Punjabi kisas. The Burns environmental scar, deforestation for siege engines denuding Hindu Kush slopes, leading to erosions that silted rivers, oases shrinking as aquifers depleted by war's thirst. Mongol introduction of sorghum and millet diversified crops, but overgrazing by vast herds compacted soils, precursors to Dust Bowl lessons. Plagues vector, black rats thriving in abandoned granaries hitched to fleeing caravans. Modern eco-projects restore qanats, underground channels engineered pre-burn, filtering water through gravel beds pure as mountain snow. In art history, the burn dispersed styles. Ilkhanid manuscripts with Chinese cloud bands framing Quranic calligraphy, influencing Sienese painters via trade. Beatus maps of the world with Asia's riches exaggerated from Polo spurred Magellan. Musicologically, Mongol throat singing kume blended with Persian tar in Chagatai courts, echoing in Tuvan festivals today. Culinary fusions, mantu dumplings from Yuan to Ottoman manti, stuffed with lamb and yogurt tracing to steppe yurts. Fashion kaftans from Kaftani Mongoli, buttoned high for horse riding, adopted by Cossacks and Poles. The road's linguistic legacy, Turkic superstrat on Persian, loanwords like horde from Urdu, Khan, universal for leader. In philosophy, Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed, written pre-Bern in Cairo, influenced via translations in Tabriz, reconciling Aristotle with Torah as Tusi did with Avicenna. Sufi orders like Naqshbandi, born in Bukhara's ruins, spread silent dhikr to India, founding Deobandi schools. The Bern's demographic shift, urban depopulation pushing nomadism, then repopulation with slaves from Rus and Circassia, lightening skin tones in Uzbekistan. Genetic studies show elevated lactose tolerance from steppe genes in Han populations. In military history, the Mongol way of war, mobility, intelligence, psychological terror, inspired Napoleon's corps system, blitzkriegs, encirclements. Clausewitz read Uvini's History of the Conqueror, penned under Ilkhan patronage. Modern asymmetric warfare echoes Jalal's guerrillas. Space race analogs, Apollo guidance computers crunching trajectories like Moraga astronomers. Internet's packet switching akin to YAM relays. The narrative's hook pulls us to imagine a merchant in 1218 Otrar, haggling over saffron, unaware his spilled kumis sparks apocalypse. His descendant perhaps a coder in Silicon Valley, tracing ancestry to a spared weaver. Or a girl in burned Merv, hiding in a Karez, emerging to teach daughters astronomy from memory. Her line birthing Hypatia-like figures in Islamic golden revival. The story is infinite, threads unending. The burn a chapter in eternal weave. The echoes of those unsung voices lingered like the faint scent of frankincense wafting from a cracked censer in a forgotten caravanserai, pulling us deeper into the labyrinth of what was lost and what endured when the Silk Road's flames consumed the Khwarezmian dream. To truly grasp the war's visceral grip, we must revisit the sieges not as footnotes in annals but through the eyes of those trapped within, fictionalized yet faithful to the shards of history preserved in Persian chronicles like Juvayni's Tarikh-i Jahangusha and the terse Mongol secret history, where hyperbole meets the raw crunch of bone on stone. Imagine a young scribe in Otrar, let's call him Farid, ink-stained fingers clutching a reed pen as he tallied grain stores in the governor's diwan, the air thick with the dust of incoming hordes visible from the battlements like a black tide swallowing the horizon. Farid, orphaned by bandit raids on his family's caravan from Kashgar, had found refuge in Inalchuk's service, his Sogdian tongue fluent in the patois of trade that masked his secret devotion to the Zoroastrian flames his grandmother kindled in hidden cellars. As the siege dragged into its 5th month, the city's wells ran brackish. Rats gnawing on the heels of sleepers in mosques turned dormitories, and Farid's ledgers shifted from commerce to casualties, arrows expended, catapults felled by counterweight stones that shook the earth like divine wrath. He witnessed the molten silvers pour from a parapet, Inalchuk's screams bubbling like overboiled stew as the metal sealed his fate, a grotesque alchemy that turned greed to agony. When the walls breached, Farid slipped into the throng of captives, his literacy sparing him the sword, marched eastward in chains that chafed wrists raw. He was conscripted into the horde's scriptoria, transcribing edicts on birch bark under butter lamps that sputtered in yurt drafts, his quill now serving the destroyers of his world. Years later, in Karakoram's nascent archives, Farid's hand copied fragments of the very texts he'd mourned lost, Euclid's elements salvaged from Bukhara's madrasas, their geometric proofs bent to siege engineering for walls yet to fall. His descendant, perhaps, inked the marginalia that reached Renaissance Venice, proofs evolving into Descartes' coordinates. Shift to Bukhara, where a Jewish merchant's wife, Rachel, bartered her last bolt of indigo-dyed silk for a place in the women's quarter during the surrender, her husband already impaled on the gates for refusing to reveal hidden gold. Rachel, versed in the Talmudic debates of her Baghdad kin, whispered psalms to her children as Mongol overseers inventoried the suku, their boots grinding saffron into the dust that once perfumed royal banquets. Spared for her skill in embroidery, patterns of pomegranate symbolizing fertility now stitched onto the Khan's banners, she wove tales into tapestries, hidden motifs of David slinging stones at Goliath like horsemen, a subtle rebellion that traveled with the horde to grace Ogedai's palace walls. In Samarkand, an Armenian vintner named Grigory fermented grapes in clay kvevri buried under his cellar, the siege's thirst-driving soldiers to unearth them in drunken raids. But Grigory's knowledge of vintages earned him a role in the Khan's cellars. His wines laced with herbs that masked the taste of poison in failed assassination plots. These eyewitness threads humanize the apocalypse. A child in Urgench, floating on a door amid the flooded canals, watching pyres reflect in waters choked with the dead. Growing to become a dam builder in the Ilkhanate, redirecting rivers to irrigate fields that fed the next generation's conquests. Or a Sufi dervish in Nishapur, spinning in ecstasy as walls crumbled, his whirls a prayer that survived to seed orders in Delhi, where whirling dervishes still turn under Mughal chandeliers. The Battle of the Indus revisited, pulses with such intimacy. Jalal ad-Din, sweat-streaked and mail-clad, pausing mid-charge to quench his thirst from a leather flask offered by a Hindu camp follower. Her sari tucked for riding, her loyalty bought with promises of freedom in a new realm. As arrows thudded into elephant hides, she shielded a fallen Mongol boy, mercy and chaos birthing mixed-blood lineages that dot Punjab villages today. Genghis, from his ridge, spared a thought for his own youth, fleeing rivals across frozen rivers, seeing in Jalal a mirror of unbowed spirit. These personal vignettes, drawn from the mosaic of survivor accounts in Rashid al-Din's compendium, reveal the war not as monolithic destruction but a crucible of individual reinventions, where the burned road's ashes fertilized unlikely alliances, a Chinese gunner teaching Persians fire lance recipes, or a Rus slave carving chess pieces for Kublai's board. Knights modeled on steppe archers, economic undercurrents propelled the flame as surely as wind fans a brush fire. The Silk Road's wealth a magnet for Mongol avarice. Its disruption a shockwave that reshaped global trade long before European joint stock companies dreamed of spices. Pre-war Khwarezm thrived on tolls, 10% on caravans at Otrar, exacted in silver dirhams stamped with the Shah's profile, funding armies that swelled to 400,000 in boasts, but likely half that in reality, sustained by granaries bulging with Zarafshan wheat and cotton from Fergana valleys, spun into muslin fine enough for Califal undergarments. The war's onset cratered this. Caravans diverted north through Kipchak lands or south via Indian Ocean ports. Genoese factors in Kaffa profiting from rerouted furs while Venetian rivals in Tabriz languished. Mongol conquest imposed the Ortak system, merchant partnerships with princely capital, loans at 10% interest funding ventures that returned tenfold in slaves and silk, a proto-capitalism that funneled wealth to Karakoram's treasuries, vaults groaning under jade from Khotan and pearls from Persian Gulf divers. Post-burn, the Pax Mongolica slashed banditry, yam stations cutting transit times from months to weeks, boosting volumes, paper from Samarkand mills. Invented pre-war but scaled under UN, flooding Europe via horde ports, depreciating parchment and birthing the printing press's precursor in Gutenberg's Bible. Gunpowder, saltpeter mined in Bihar and sulfur from Caspian vents, flowed westward, Ottoman janissaries adopting hand cannons by 1400s, opium from Assam poppies, taxed heavily, addicted song remnants, while rhubarb roots cured Mongol dysentery, saving more lives than swords claimed. The economic erasure was stark. Merv's pre-war population of 500,000 plummeted to near zero. Its dams breached flooding markets into malarial swamps, recovery taking centuries under Timurid subsidies. Baghdad's sack drained Abbasid coffers, 800,000 bezants in gold melted into ingots for Hulagu's mints, crashing dirham values and inflating prices in Cairo, where Mamluks hoarded to fund anti-Mongol wars. Yet rebirth came. Ilkhan Ghana's 1295 tax reforms, capping at 30% and abolishing extraordinary levies, spurred agriculture. Mulberry orchards replanted for silkworms that spun cocoons into robes for European nobility. Yuan's paper chow, backed by silver reserves, stabilized trade from Dadu to Delhi, but hyperinflation under later Khans echoed modern fiat crises. Comparative economics with other conquests, Alexander's Hellenistic fusion paled in scale, his satrapies extracting tribute but not integrating markets. Roman roads endured but taxed statically, no Mongol mobility. Arab conquests spread Islam but preserved Byzantine bureaucracy, unlike Mongol meritocracy elevating Uyghur clerks over Persian aristocrats. The Burns Ledger, Short-term devastation, GDP equivalents halving in Transoxiana, but long-term globalization, Eurasian GDP share shifting east before West's catch-up in industrial spikes. Slave trade boomed, 100,000 captives from Khorasan annually, laboring in Chinese salt mines or Persian rug looms, depressing wages but diffusing skills. Korean papermakers in Tabriz birthing Islamic paper revolutions. Tea bricks as currency in Siberia, compressed with mare's blood for flavor, traded for sable pelts that warmed Muscovy boyars. The road's economic phoenix funded Marco Polo's Venice, his family's investments in yuan bonds yielding fortunes that bankrolled doges. In modern terms, the war's disruption mirrors OPEC embargoes or Suez blockages, supply chains snapping then rewiring stronger, BRI loans echoing Ortak partnerships with debt traps for Pakistan's Gwadar port. Comparative histories sharpen the blade of understanding, placing the Mongol cataclysm alongside Rome's fall, where Visigoths sacked in 410 but preserved aqueducts, or Cortez in Tenochtitlan, raising temples yet syncretizing with Aztec gold fueling Spain's armada. Alexander's burn of Persepolis in 330 BCE was drunken revenge, libraries spared unlike Nishapur's. His empire fragmented in Diadochi wars, no packs like Mongols. The Arab Rashidun blitz of 630s, 650s conquered Sassanids, but tolerated Zimmis, taxing jizya while Mongols demanded submission or death. Yet both diffused knowledge, Greek via Arabic, then Mongol via Persian. Spanish Reconquistas, 1492 Granada fall expelled Moors, erasing Andalusian splendor in auto-da-fe bonfires, but preserving algebra for Seville's schools, akin to Moraga's salvage. Napoleon's 1812 Russian scorched earth mirrored Khwarezm's flooded defenses, but winter claimed more than Cossacks, no cultural fusion like Yuan opera. Hitler's Barbarossa echoed Subutais raids, encirclements at Kiev like Khalkha, but ideology blinded logistics, no Mongol adaptability to steppe blizzards. Colonial scrambles, British in India aping Mughals, Russian in Turkestan echoing horde yokes, imposed rails where yam galloped, extracting cotton for Lancashire mills. The Holocaust's industrial erasure dwarfs individual sacks, but Mongol pyramids of skulls prefigure genocide's dehumanization. Viking longships raided like Mongol Tumans, but settled as Normans, no empire-spanning peace. Maori wars in New Zealand displaced tribes, but musket trades amplified like Mongol gunpowder. The burn stands unique in scale. 4 Khanates stitching continents, plague as unintended export balancing populations. Future speculations branch from this. Alternate timelines where Otrar's envoys return unharmed, Khwarezm allying with Mongols against Song, a bipolar Eurasia stalling Europe's age of sail, or Jalal victorious at Indus, fragmenting into Turkic sultanates accelerating gunpowder spread, Ottomans rising earlier. In steampunk visions, Mongol engineers harness steam from Chinese texts, ironclads on Caspian clashing with Byzantine dromons. Dystopian futures see AI hordes simulating sieges, drone swarms echoing arrow storms over smart cities. Utopian, the PAX as model for UN peacekeeping, YAM relays inspiring blockchain ledgers. Climate models predict 13th century droughts from Mongolian tree rings exacerbated invasions. Future warming reopening Arctic Silk roads via Northwest Passage. Russian icebreakers guarding routes Genghis dreamed. Space colonization analogs, Mars YAM stations relaying oxygen, Mongol mobility suiting zero-G nomadism, genetic engineering reviving extinct steppe horses from permafrost DNA, riders in exosuits charging asteroid belts. The narrative's arc bends toward reflection. The day the Silk Road burned was humanity's forge, tempering fragility into resilience, a warning that in our nuclear age, one insult can ignite global pyres. But from cinders, connections reborn stronger, threads of silk binding wounds into scars of memory. The reflections crystallize in the quiet aftermath, where the horde's thunder faded to the clip-clop of post horses galloping relays under Ogadai's edicts, carrying not just decrees but seeds of renewal, apple cuttings from Samarkand orchards grafted onto Altai roots, birthing fruits that sweetened Karakoram feasts. Yet the burned psychological scar ran deep, collective trauma birthing myths that shaped identities. Mongols as divine scourge in Persian lore, Heroes in secret histories verses recited at Nayadam festivals where wrestlers grapple in eagle dance. Khwarezmians scattered as refugees, their descendants in Anatolia founding Rum Seljuks' successors, weaving carpets with motifs of flaming roads as talismans against forgetfulness. The war's medical toll, amputations from frostbite in Pamir pursuits, herbalists brewing willow bark teas for arrow wounds, precursors to aspirin diffused via Ilkhan physicians to Salerno's schools, plague precursors in 12 Chinese Khorasan outbreaks, marmot hunts spreading buboes, priming for 1340's Black Death, mental legacies, PTSD in survivors, shamans exorcising fire demons in sweat lodges, therapies echoing modern CBT and Sufi meditation, artistic catharsis, miniatures depicting sieges with Khans as blue-skinned demons, or heroic Jalal swimming rivers of blood, therapy for traumatized illuminators, literary responses, Ferdowsi's Shahnameh copied phonetically, pre-burn post-war editions with Mongol interpolations, Rustam battling horse archers, Polo's ghost-written tome as trauma narrative, exaggerations masking Venetian awe at survival's wonders, philosophical rebounds, Ibn Khaldun in Maghreb analyzing Asabiya group solidarity, Mongol cohesion as model for cycles of rise and fall, influencing Toynbee's civilizations. Theological shifts, Nestorians thriving under Sorghaghtani, preaching to hordes, Rabban Sama's 1287 Paris mission proposing crusades inverted. Buddhist lamas in Kublai's court debating voidness with Confucians, synods birthing Gelug reforms in Tibet. The Burns gender dynamics, women as spoils yet power brokers, Turgen Khatun ruling as regent 1241-46, maneuvering Guyuk's election amid Kurultai intrigues. Her seals on edicts enforcing matrilineal traces in inheritance. Captive queens like Jalal's sister bartering diplomacy in harems, birthing princes who tempered conquest with mercy. Educational legacies. Madrasas rebuilt with Mongol funds. Curriculum blending Quran with Yasa law. Ulugh Beg's seminary teaching trigonometry for prayer times. Scientific continuities. Al-Tusi's planetary models refining Ptolemy. Zigi-Ilkhani tables predicting eclipses funding Hulagu's wars. Botanical exchanges. Citrus from Song to Persian orchards. Lemons souring Ilkhan sherbets. Zoological. Cheetahs hunted with Mongol leashes, exported to Mughal courts for coursing antelope. Culinary evolutions post-burn. Plav rice pilafs incorporating horse meat, birthing Uzbek national dishes. Fashion fusions. Turban wraps with fur trim. Russian boyars adopting under Catherine. The road's revival in numbers. Caravan traffic tripling by 1300 per Armenian chronicles. Tolls funding observatories. Demographic rebounds. Repopulation via slave imports. Diversity boosting innovation like Armenian printing presses in 1500s. Political evolutions. Khanati's decentralization, prefiguring federalism, Ulis divisions as proto-states. Legal hybrids. Yasa's decimal organization influencing Ottoman Taimars, tribal levies becoming Janissary Devsirme. The narrative pulses with what-ifs. No Genghis poisoning in 1227. Tangut campaign pushing to Himalayas, allying with Tibet against Song earlier. Or Ogedei lives longer. European campaign conquering to Atlantic. Latin replaced by Uyghur script in Paris monasteries. Kublai fails at Java, naval tech stalling, no Ming fleets. Timur converts rather than limps, holy war unifying Islam against Christendom. These branches fan into infinity. The burn a pivot where history teetered. Concluding reflections bind the threads. The day the Silk Road burned erased Khwarezm, but illuminated Eurasia. A holocaust birthing harmony in diversity's forge. From Otrar's spark to global webs, the lesson endures. Connectivity's flame warms or consumes. Hubris the wind that fans it. In our era of hyperloops and starships, the ancient road whispers. Tread lightly on shared paths, lest one betrayal scorch the caravan of humankind anew. Yet hope glimmers in the rebuild. Samarkand's domes regilded. Bukhara's bazaars bustling, the road eternal, phoenix-like. Rising from every burn, deeper into the microcosms. The war's battlefield tactics dissected reveal genius and terror. Tulugma feints at Parwan, luring Khwarezmians into ambushes where signal flags of yak-tail directed flanks like conductor batons. Siegecraft evolved. Chinese engineers Huopao firepots at Urgench, nap the mixtures igniting canals into infernos. Logistical marvels, herds of 100,000 horses per tumen, remounts allowing 100-mile daily marches, forages stripping fields bare but sustaining mobility Rome envied. Intelligence networks, spies in bazaars posing as falconers, pigeons carrying micro-messages in quills. Psychological ops, noisemakers of whistling arrows terrifying elephants at Indus, drums thundering sleepless nights. Naval adaptations on Yangtze, ironclads ramming songjunks. Comparative tactics, Hannibal's cannae pincer pale beside Kalka, no reserve exploitation. Caesar's Alesia circumvallation mirrored at Otrar, but with mobile horse screens. Modern parallels, patent sweeps echoing Yabi, drone surveillance like scout riders. Fictional tactician's journal, Annoyan's yurt ledger noting wind directions for arrow arcs, rain softening walls for sappers. Economic micro-studies, hyperlocal. A Bukhara weaver's output pre-war 50 bolts annually, post 10 under tribute, recovery to 30 under packs. Slave valuations, skilled artisan 20 horses, virgin girl 10, per Yasa tariffs. The Burns monetary history, dirham debasement post-Baghdad, cow introduction stabilizing. Trade goods specifics, lapis from Badakhshan, 90% world supply controlled by Chagatai, pricing Venetian ultramarine pigment sky high for Madonna robes. Sapphire routes from Ceylon via Delhi rerouted post-Indus, Mughal monopolies later. The narrative weaves these grains into tapestry. The human cost in numbers staggers. Chronicles claim 15 million dead. Modern estimates 10 to 20% Eurasian population, depopulating cities 90% in spots. Refugee waves, 50,000 to India, seeding Delhi Sultanate armies. Orphan trains literal. Children march to Mongolia, raised as tumen fodder. Widow economies, harem swelling, polyandry in depleted villages. The road's rebirth demographics. Intermarriage rates 30% in Ulysses, hybrid vigor in Yuan bureaucracy. Cultural microfusions. Nestorian hymns in Mongol script, Syriac psalms chanted in yurts. The story spirals endless as spirals tighten. Eyewitness compilations from hypothetical chronicles. A compiled burned scrolls anthology. Voices like a Merv Potter describing kiln firings turned to corpse cremations, or Herat Archer loosing final shafts from minarets. Aggregated, they paint sensory hells. Acrid smoke stinging eyes, copper blood taste, horse sweat reek, flame roars drowning prayers. Olfactory memories, jasmine gardens trampled into mud, saffron spilled like gold dust under boots. Auditory, Yatagan clashes, elephant trumpets, child wails. Tactile, arrow thuds vibrating shields, frost-numbing fingers on bowstrings. Visual, turquoise domes cracking, skies blackened by vulture wings. Gustatory, boot leather boiled, mare's milk curdled by fear sweat. These sensory immersions recreate immersion, VR precursors and oral traditions, comparative sensory conquests. Trojan horse whispers versus Mongol thunder. The Burns sensory legacy in art. Odor poems in Persian divans evoking lost sense. Future visions expand. 22nd century Neo-Mongol federations on Mars domes. Yam hyperloops tubing oxygen. Genetic legacies amplified. CRISPR editing horde resilience into colonists. AI simulating Genghis Council for crisis. The eternal flame. In final weave, the hook returns full circle. The flicker in Otrar igniting not end but evolution. Civilizations erase a palimpsest overwritten with bolder scripts. From ashes, the road repaved in steel and silicon, but the warning etched. Guard the spark, lest the caravan burn again. This is the day the Silk Road burned, a saga of destruction's seed-sowing connections harvest, humanity's shared blaze illuminating the path eternal. As the phoenix's embers cooled into the fertile soil of renewed horizons, the Silk Road's scorched veins pulsed anew with the lifeblood of adaptation, where Mongol overseers in felt caps stamped with the Khan's Tamga patrolled rebuilt caravanserais, their whips cracking less for punishment and more for the rhythm of commerce reborn. In the shadow of Samarkand's fractured Registan, where tiles pried from the rubble were reset by hands once bloodied in defense, a new generation of traders emerged. Sons of spared artisans haggling over bolts of silk that now bore the subtle watermark of a soaring eagle. The horde's emblem woven into the warp and weft as a tax on survival. These merchants, their caravans lighter without the old Khwarezmian tolls that had choked the flow like silt in a kanat, traversed passes where avalanches had buried the bones of the fallen, their camels' bells chiming a dirge-turned anthem. The war's end was no clean suture, but a cauterized wound. The Pax Mongolica, a bandage of iron enforced by the Yam's relentless gallop. Stations every 25 miles where riders swapped mounts slick with sweat. Their saddlebags bulging with paisa passports of hammered gold that parted gates like Moses' staff, the Red Sea. From the rebuilt walls of Bukhara, where the Kalyan minaret stood defiant, its bricks baked harder in the siege fires, couriers raced westward to Tabriz, carrying bolts of yuan paper money crisp as autumn leaves, or eastward to Dadu with ingots of Ilkhan silver chased with arabesques that blended lotus blooms and Quranic vines. This enforced peace was a double-edged yataghan, safe for the Venetian who bartered Veronese glass for Kashgar jade, deadly for the bandit who found his head gracing a pike at the crossroads, a warning that echoed Inalchuk's molten fate. Yet beneath the surface calm, resentments simmered like tea in a samovar. Persian poets in Herat's hidden divans composing qasidas that veiled curses in praise, calling the Khan a blue-eyed wolf cloaked in heaven's mandate, their ink mixed with the gall of lost libraries. Women, those resilient threads in the tapestry, wove the revival's fabric. A captive from Nishapur, her fingers nimble from years at the loom, taught Mongol princesses the art of double ikat dyeing, patterns of flames that symbolized both destruction and the hearth's warm glow. Her lessons whispered in Turkic laced with Farsi, birthing hybrids who would grace Kublai's court in robes that shimmered like the road's mirages. Children born of the unions, forced or pragmatic, grew bilingual in the yurt and the madrasa, their games mimicking sieges with sticks for arrows and snowballs for catapult stones, innocence reclaiming the playgrounds of horror. The environmental reclaiming was slower, deliberate. Mongol engineers, schooled by Chinese captives, dammed the Zarafshan anew, not to flood but to irrigate terraced fields rising in steppes where once pyramids of skulls had mocked the sky, wheat sprouting golden from soil enriched by the ash of the dead. Apricot orchards, replanted from cuttings smuggled in a widow's braid, burst into blossom each spring, their fruit bartered in bazaars where the air hummed with the haggling of a dozen tongues. Uyghur barters with Armenian vintners, Korean papermakers dickering with Rus furriers, the road's Babel a symphony of survival. Astronomical observatories rose on the ruins of fire temples. Ulugh Beg's brass quadrants in Samarkand charting stars that had witnessed the burn, their calculations etched into ZG tables that predicted eclipses with a precision that awed Franciscan envoys, who carried copies back to Oxford's nascent halls. Seeds of Copernican doubt planted in monastic soil. The cultural syncretism was intoxicating. Shaman drums beating alongside muezzin calls in Karakoram's streets, where felt yurts huddled against tiled mosques, their minarets piercing skies heavy with the smoke of butter lamps and incense braziers. Nestorian crosses dangled from the necks of Noyans who consulted Tibetan lamas for auspicious battle dates, their horoscopes cast with bones thrown like dice in the dust. Literature flourished in the cracks. Rashid al-Din's Universal History, penned in a scriptorium cooled by Afghan fans, wove Genghis's lineage into biblical patriarchs. Adam's progeny culminating in the Khan's divine right. Pages illuminated with miniatures where steppe horsemen charged alongside Alexander's companions, a visual bridge over the chasm of erasure. Music evolved too. Dombra strings plucked to melodies that fused Persian modes with Mongol overtone singing, Kumi throats harmonizing in yurts where weddings celebrated the melding of bloodlines, brides veiled in silk that had crossed continents twice. Culinary arts transformed the palate of power, kumis fermented with song yeasts, yielding a fizz that tickled Kublai's tongue during banquets where swan roasted on spits turned by Rus slaves mingled with saffron rice pilafs spiced from Mamluk caravans. Fashion became a banner of the new order, deal robes buttoned left over right for horsemen, but embroidered with Ilkhan florals for court, fur trim from Siberian sables warming shoulders that had once borne the weight of conquest. The road's economic engine roared back, Ortak partnerships funding ventures that returned spices from Malabar ports rerouted through Hormuz, where Portuguese factors would later haggle, or tea from Fujian hills compressed into bricks that doubled as currency in Tibetan monasteries. Slave markets in Crimea thronged with captives turned craftsmen, their skills auctioned to the highest paisa. Korean potters firing celadon that graced Golden Horde tables, their glazes cracking in the freeze-thaw of Volga winters. Demographic shifts redrew maps. cities repopulated with a mosaic, Han bureaucrats in Dadu administering Mongol levies, Persian physicians in Tabriz lancing boils on Armenian merchants. Diversity a buffer against the monoculture that had doomed Khwarizm's arrogance. Political structures ossified into the four Ulysses, each a Khan in his realm, yet tethered by the Kurultai's ghostly authority. Ogeday's silver tree fountain in Karakoram dispensing mare's milk and wine as symbols of unity, its mechanical birds tweeting melodies composed by captured Byzantine clockmakers. Legal codes hybridized the Yasa's harsh decimals with Sharia's mercy, punishments swift, but appeals possible through viziers who balanced scales with the wisdom of spared ulama. Theological dialogues crackled in the courts. William of Rubruck debating Buddhist voidness with shamans who invoked Tengri's blue sky. His letters home painting the horde as potential converts. Dreams dashed by Kublai's pragmatic tolerance. Gender roles flexed. Khatans like Toragin issuing edicts from behind silk screens, their seals heavier than swords in regency intrigues. Educational academies sprouted, madrasas teaching algebra alongside archery, students reciting Avicenna while knocking arrows feathered with goose plumes. Scientific inquiries probed the Burns lessons, alchemists in Moraga distilling naphtha remnants into elixirs, astronomers mapping comets as omens of the Khan's favor. Botanical gardens in Xanadu cultivated rhubarb beside roses, hybrids blooming in scents that evoked lost oases. Zoological menageries roared with lions from African tribute and elephants from Vietnamese jungles, their howdahs refitted for parades. The narrative's depth plunges into the personal once more, a fictional diary of a yam rider. Pages smudged with hoof dust, chronicling dashes from Tashkent to Tehran, messages of alliance sealed in wax that melted under desert suns, his rests and stations where hostlers shared tales of the Great Burn, ghosts haunting the hearths, or a merchant's ledger from Tabriz, entries tallying profits from gunpowder sales to Mamluks, ingredients sourced from Bihar mines via Chagatai middlemen. These micro-histories illuminate the macro rebirth, the road not just rebuilt but elevated, a highway of empire where the flames had purified the dross. Yet shadows lingered, famines from overtaxed lands, rebellions quenched in blood, the pacts of velvet glove over an iron fist. The Burns' ultimate legacy was motion. Ideas galloping faster than horses, gunpowder igniting European forges, decimals gracing Italian banks, plague balancing the scales of overpopulation. In this flowing resurrection, the Silk Road emerged stronger, its threads knotted tighter by the fire that sought to sever them, a testament to humanity's unquenchable drive to connect, trade, and transcend the ashes of yesterday. The resurrection's momentum carried into realms of the mind and spirit, where the war's trauma birthed philosophies of resilience. Sufi mystics in Delhi's new Khankas meditating on the impermanence of domes and dynasties, their whirls a defiance of the siege's chaos. Artistic revivals painted the pain, Timurid miniatures depicting the horde as jinn from brass lamps, their arrows trails of stardust. Lovers reuniting amid rubble-strewn gardens where pomegranates split to reveal seeds like drops of survivors' blood. Literary epics expanded the Shahnameh with chapters on Temujin's trials, Rustam dueling a one-eyed Khan in verses that humanized the scourge. Musical traditions layered throat songs over santur strums, epics sung at Nadam games where archers competed under banners, fluttering with the nine-horse tales of legend. Culinary fusions deepened, booze dumplings stuffed with mutton and wild leeks from the steppe, dipped in yogurt sauces spiced with cumin from Indus valleys, feasts that bridged the divide at Kurultai gatherings. Fashion evolved into symbols of status. Paisa pendants dangling from turbans, silk sashes dyed in colors denoting Ulis loyalty. Economic microcosms thrived, a Samarkand mint striking square coins with holes for stringing, chow notes illustrated with dragons coiling around wolves. Demographic blends created new ethnicities, Hazara faces blending Mongol epicanthic folds with Persian aquiline noses, their forts in Afghanistan guarding passes reborn. Political intrigues wove plots in the harems, Khatans poisoning rivals with nightshade distilled from Khorasan herbs. Legal precedents set mercy clauses, Yasa tempered by hadith on justice. Theological synods in Dadu hosted debates where lamas, rabbis, and imams argued under Kublai's gaze, tolerance a tool of rule. Gender empowerment saw women owning Ortak shares, their caravans led by eunuch guards. Educational curricula mandated multilingualism, children reciting Confucius beside the secret history. Scientific breakthroughs, compasses adapted for desert navigation, star charts guiding night marches. Botanical exchanges yielded hardier crops, wheat strains resistant to the blights that followed war's neglect. Zoological imports enriched hunts, falcons from the Altai swooping on cranes in Ilkan preserves. The personal touches, a fictional letter from a spared scholar to his lost love, ink fading on paper carried by Yam, words of hope amid the rebuild. The road's pulse quickened, a heartbeat of empire sinking continents. Deeper still, the tactical legacies informed generations. Manuals copied in Uyghur script detailing Tulugma feints, distributed to Ottoman Sipahis who encircled Vienna with echoes of Mohi. Logistical tomes on herd management inspired Napoleonic supply trains. Though winter betrayed as it had not the stepsons, intelligence networks evolved into spy rings, pigeons giving way to runners in Safavid courts. Psychological warfare refined in propaganda edicts, Khans proclaimed as reincarnations of bodhisattvas. Modern echoes in guerrilla doctrines, Mao's protracted war drawing from Jalal's hit and run. Fictional war councils, Noyans around campfires debating diversions, shamans reading entrails for omens. Economic specifics, tribute quotas, 10% of herds, 1 in 10 captives, funding the Yam. Trade volumes, silk exports doubling under packs, per Polo's tallies. Human costs revisited, widows remarrying into the horde, birthing bilingual brokers. Cultural fusions and festivals, Navruz celebrated with Mongol wrestling, fireworks from gunpowder lighting Persian nights. The narrative flows inexhaustible, sensory revivals immerse the reborn. The tang of fermented arag cutting through rosewater perfumes and bazaars, the crunch of nayan baked in tandoors fired with camel dung, the silks whisper against skin scarred by arrow grazes, the dome's echo amplifying calls to prayer mingled with shaman rattles, the starlit chill of desert nights where campfires crackled with tales of the burn, comparative senses in other eras, the form's marble cool versus Registan's tile warmth, futuristic senses, neural links evoking Kume harmonies in virtual yurts, the weave tightens, legacies layering, environmental recoveries with qanats flowing clear, forests regrown for arrow shafts, medical advances from battlefield surgeries, catgut sutures closing wounds that birthed Yuan hospitals. Artistic catharses in theater, Yuan Zaju plays dramatizing Genghis's rise with shadow puppets dancing on silk screens. Philosophical profundities in treatises on power's cycle, Ibn Khaldun nodding to the horde's asabiya, theological tolerances birthing Unitarian whispers in Transoxiana, gender shifts with cartoons minting coins in their image, educational explosions in printed texts, woodblocks carving knowledge post-paper revival, scientific leaps with magnetic compasses pointing to Polo's wonders, the personal eternal, a child's drawing on yurt felt, horses galloping over flames toward dawn. In this endless flow, the road reincarnates. From camel tracks to maglev lines humming under BRI banners, the burn of baptism by fire into global unity's embrace. The day the Silk Road burned, forged the world anew, its flames a crucible for connections that time cannot quench, a hook pulling us forever along the endless caravan of what was, is, and shall be.